Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today I've got my friend Bradley Roth on the show. Now, Bradley's going to do a quick intro here, but he is the creator of Not Most People, a podcast and movement for those allergic to mediocrity, groupthink, and following the status quo. I almost messed that word up.
Takes a little practice, yeah.
It takes a little practice. See, I'm a little rusty. I just mentioned I haven't done an interview, so for those listening, I only am interviewing people that I like and that I want to bring on, and Bradley checked those boxes, which is why he's here today. But Bradley, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick for the audience?
Yeah, well, first off, I feel honored to be one of the first people interviewed in a while.
Well, you're not like most people, right?
That's true. That's true. Which, yeah, we'll get into. I mean, honestly, what you said, not most people, the podcast, the movement, we'll get into all of that stuff. I really don't have a whole lot of like formal titles compared to the average podcast guest who has like this long list, like author, speaker, and coach and all this stuff. And I'm working on that, working towards that. But yeah, I mean, I'm just like, I'm a normal dude, but I kind of think different than most people is how I like to think about it. So I'm from Connecticut. I live currently in Scottsdale, Arizona, just got married last month. And just building the dream. So there's really not a whole lot of other titles, man.
There's a lot of life events happening over there. You know, the move, Yep. You got a show. I congratulated you. I don't know if you had a chance to see your story yet, but I'm like, dude, congrats on all the signups. You're launching a community. You've already got members on there before the pricing increases. So it's really cool just seeing other people coming up with ideas, being creative, you know, creating content and seeing motion and momentum. So congrats on all of that.
Thank you.
How long ago did you move to Arizona?
It's crazy. It feels like yesterday, but it was 3 years ago in January. So
okay, cool.
Like 2019. Yeah.
Very cool. And you just wanted to change the scenery. You wanted to get away from cold weather or something like that, or what?
That was part of it. You know, the way it happened was me and my now wife, we were just, dating at the time. We've been together for a while. We were from the Northeast. I'm from Connecticut. She's from New Jersey. So that tri-state area. Grew up there our whole lives. She was a nurse. I was working at the gym. That was my initial background. That's what I went to college for. That's what I did for about 5 years. After I graduated, I also spent a couple of years as a realtor like you. Didn't end up being my calling necessarily, but learned a lot from it for sure. But we were basically like, we got bit really hard with the travel bug. Like we really wanted to go around, see the country, see the world. And I know you're kind of doing it with real estate, which is a little different, but I at the time was like, well, I can't do that with real estate. That was my thinking.
Hey, I got a course for that. No, just kidding.
Yeah, right. There you go. That's missed me by a few years, but yeah. So we decided that with her being a nurse, we're like, well, we can travel nurse and do 3 months here, 3 months there, kind of see what we like. And so we took off. The first place we went was Columbia, South Carolina. And because the first travel assignment is usually the hardest to get. You don't have that resume of doing it and stuff. So your choices are a little limited, but we like South Carolina more than the Northeast. Southern hospitality is a real thing. So we were there for a few months. Her roommate from college happened to live there. So that was a cool connection. But anyways, after that, we were looking at like, where do we go next? And Phoenix opened up at the Mayo Clinic. And so we're like, well, we had been to the Grand Canyon, but we've never been to like Phoenix area, like in Arizona. So we're like, let's try that. We've never been. We didn't know a single person out there. We had a dually, like a big, with the 4 wheels in the back Dodge Ram that we had bought because we were going to get a 5th wheel and live out of that. But the 5th wheel part never happened. Just the really expensive truck that you couldn't really drive anywhere. So we had my little car. We got a U-Haul. We packed everything in the truck and we drove cross country to Arizona. And January in Arizona is pretty nice compared to where we were from. And so we just fell in love with it. And 3 months.
Summer though.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, that's true. There's no place that's perfect, right?
That's true. So, I'm joking.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So we drove across the country. We didn't know anyone. And we just 3 months turned into 6. We're like, oh, we'll stay another 3 to 9 months. Then we started making friends, and then we're like, all right, we'll just be here for a bit. And so
that's awesome.
It's home now. Yeah.
How many assignments did you do before you ended up in Arizona? That was the second assignment for your wife?
Yeah, we had plans to go to do like all over the country, do for like a couple of years, do like 7 or 8 different places, see what we really liked. And yeah, we just kind of planted roots. At the time I was doing online marketing because I
Okay.
left the gym back in Connecticut. And so I had to start something on my own. And that was kind of my first step into entrepreneurship. I said, you know what, I like marketing and the psychology of it and social media, which was still, it was probably a little less saturated at the time. And so I was like, you know, I'm going to work for local businesses. And turns out it's really hard to get clients for local businesses when you're constantly moving and traveling.
Right.
So we said, why don't we kind of stay put here for a while, kind of build a little bit of a foundation, and then maybe we'll go somewhere else later. And we just never really did. We still actually have plans to. We're trying to get her mobile and stuff, which that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I was doing the online marketing and just totally jumped off the deep end there. Like I had never worked in a real company. I had never had a mentor. I didn't know a single entrepreneur growing up. I didn't know what the word entrepreneur meant until I was like 22, probably. Like I thought, this sounds crazy, but growing up, I thought businesses were just like their own entities. Like I didn't know people could actually own them. Like
Right.
that's how like
Well, you
unversed I
never think
was.
about it. You never ever
Yeah.
think about it. You're just like, oh, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, like all these big oil and gas companies and corporations that are on Wall Street. We tend to forget that those started off as startups in most cases by, you know, two founders or three engineers
Yeah.
that broke off and started their own thing. So it is kind of neat to think about, but it's one of those things that you just never, there's a bug flying around me. So if I swat around, you know what I'm doing if you're watching on YouTube.
Very
But
animated. Yeah.
I'm very into this conversation. It's trying to kill this bug.
Yeah.
But I think what you guys did is extremely amazing because you decided to make a change. You literally packed everything up. You moved across the country. I think a lot of people are doing that now, you know, the great resignation and trying new things out and remote work, but you were kind of a pioneer because you did that before everyone else started to do it. And you really kind of started to figure out what you wanted to do. And the travel bug is so real.
Yep.
I mean, so many people I know try to figure out their remote game so they can go do the laptop lifestyle thing in like Indonesia or something. I think, you know, a lot of people go that route because it's just so much more affordable to earn US dollars and live in a place like that where your costs are so insignificant compared to, like, I'm sure Arizona rents in house prices have also skyrocketed lately.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Everything across the country has been crazy, but you've been on the path for some time. So how did you start to figure things out? I mean, you just mentioned you didn't really know about the entrepreneurship thing and you figured it out, you know, in your early 20s. Did you start reading books? Were you kind of sucked down the rabbit hole of YouTube videos? Like, what did your journey look like when you first started?
Yeah. Yeah. All the above. But before I get into that, I want to say what you said about kind of getting up and moving. That's something that really was a game changer for us and for me in particular, because I think a lot of people growing up, we get used to our surroundings, our friends, our family. We get used to going to the same places each week and that kind of stuff. And for me, it was like, again, I didn't grow up with that entrepreneurial mindset at all. And so I had this circle of people from the gym. And as soon as I started to kind of like branch away from just being the gym guy and start to do my own thing, I started getting like a lot of people like talking shit behind my back and stuff like that. That was really surprising. And when you're new and you don't have that confidence yet, like it can really affect you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it like really got in my head and I was like, it was just kind of bad energy. I was like not conducive to what I was trying to do. And also kind of you have your identity can be tied to a place.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's almost like kind of a fresh start. Like, oh, you've heard all the time people going somewhere else and kind of like reinventing themselves or starting fresh.
Right.
That's really what it was. So like for us getting out and being on our own and coming out to Arizona was like, I'm like, man, this is it. This is like this is the next chapter. I carefully cultivated my circle now to where I'm surrounded by people who support rather than like the people who were talking behind my back were like people who I thought were like, I consider to be good friends, you know, and I know a lot of people have experienced that when they try to kind of go off on their own and do bigger things or things outside the norm. And so if you feel like your environment or where you're at is, you know, bringing you down, definitely look into how you can kind of, you know, maybe you don't need to move all the way across the country,
right,
but find a way to kind of that's probably one of the easier ways to do it, honestly, even though that's like a big thing. But yeah, just like being able to kind of like move on from where you were to where you're trying to go.
Absolutely.
So,
I've
yeah.
seen the meme that says, leaving your hometown is a hack. It's just a
Mm,
secret to success of getting away from the old patterns and people and same old stuff, people talking about what they used to do. And then
yeah.
another thing I heard that I really love is surround yourself with, what was it, like people focusing on the future, not on the past again,
Mm,
not imagine when versus remember when, friends. That
yeah.
was
Not
really
talking about like the high school glory days and
yeah,
stuff,
let's
but
talk about
like,
imagine when we accomplish these goals. Let's talk about the future, not just remember when we got drunk on this day. And
right.
I don't want to hear the same stories over and over again. And so that really
Mm-hmm.
stood out to me. I wrote that down. Fresh start sounds very similar. I mean, we just moved to Colorado from Texas last year,
Yep.
didn't know anybody. And it's so relieving. I don't feel guilty. We don't have to do anything if we don't want to. We don't have to get sucked into
Right.
my parents want me to go to this random person's birthday party, right? It doesn't happen anymore. You don't have to
Yeah.
feel bad. I physically cannot go. So
Right.
it really is a hack because then you can focus on your goals. You'd be surprised, like you mentioned, for everyone listening, who really has your back and who's going to talk shit about you.
Yeah.
When you move and you start to try to think bigger and take more actions, like people come out of the woodwork and you kind of see their true colors.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll surprise you. Even people like we're talking to Nancy, my wife, like girlfriend at the time, like talking shit to me to her as if she wasn't gonna like tell me what they were saying, like it's just
like
yeah.
if she's with you, she probably wouldn't appreciate them
She's
saying
probably
that about
closer
you
with me
anyway.
than she is with you who's talking. Yeah. So
Right.
um
It's funny.
yeah. But anyways, yeah, man, it's huge. But getting back to your question earlier about kind of that getting into entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny, like I mentioned before, I did some time in real estate. I was working at the gym, but it was very part time. It was a smaller gym. So there wasn't like a lot of opportunity to get more hours there. And so I was like, I got to be working more, bringing in some other income somehow. I was still living at home, living in my parents' basement. So my expenses weren't super high, but I started looking around and I knew that I didn't want to work like a set schedule, like a 9 to 5 typical, like you got to be here at this time. I mean, I did that at the gym, but it was also pretty laid back and it was in a gym. So it was cool. But
Right.
uh, yeah, you wear your shorts and sweatpants and whatever you want to work. So I knew that I wanted something that was like had that freedom and I could kind of pick and choose my effort and my hours and that kind of stuff. So real estate was something I came across. I got my license and the broker promised me the world. I'm sure you've heard lots of these stories. And then was like, oh yeah, we're going to put you with like our rock star, like our top agent. She's going to train you and stuff like that. And like, I went on like one drive with her or something like that. And then like never heard from her again. So I was just like totally kind of like, what do I do? How do I figure this out? And so that was kind of like my first step where I was like forced into starting to learn about like sales, marketing, time management, like kind of those things that I had never really had to develop before that. And then that led to like reading about sales and marketing, led to business, entrepreneurship stuff. And that led to like mindset stuff. And so it was just kind of like this, I couldn't tell you the exact path, but it just kind of one thing led to another. And then I also spent some time in network marketing, which again was like another very heavy like sales experience, which was a good experience. Again, it wasn't the end all be all for me, but both of those things kind of really got me starting to think about like working for myself and how do I do this. And then I jumped off the deep end. Like I said, I took like a Ty Lopez's social media marketing course that I'm sure a lot of people know about. And I was like, oh, I'm an expert now and I'm going to go sign all these clients right
Start
away.
an
And
agency.
yeah, I'm like, don't worry, babe. Like I'm gonna be making like 10K a month in like 90 days, like just naivety, right? Like in the beginning, when you don't have those mentors, those people kind of showing you the way a little bit, like you'll believe the people who you see on the YouTube ads and the gurus trying to sell their programs and stuff like that. So I definitely fell prey to that. And I learned the hard way that I really had no clue what I was doing when I started out. I managed to get a few clients here and there, but nothing that was like gonna really take me anywhere. And so I spent a few years just kind of like just fumbling around, trying to keep my head above water. I went from social media marketing to more lead gen with Facebook ads and then chat bots all over the course of like a few years. And then I kind of moved my niches within there. I was kind of like just trying to find anything that's stuck. You know what I mean? And I did that, started in Connecticut, then we moved, and I was trying to do it like kind of on the move. That was tough, tougher than I expected. So, a few years in, I didn't have any savings or backup plans. So I racked up a bunch of credit card debt and was like, man, like I've been trying for like 3-4 years and I feel
Sounds
like
very familiar.
yeah, right. Like I'm sure some of you guys listening, it probably sounds familiar. You're like, man, how am I working so hard and feel like I'm making backwards progress, And then I got into the Arte Syndicate, which the group that we met through.
Yep.
And that was early, or it was right around like the start of COVID. So I think it was spring of 2020. And I got in there and it was a huge investment for me at the time. I was like, but I felt like I needed to do it. I was like, I need to get around the right people and stuff because what I'm doing is not working. And so I got in there and I had been listening to Andy Frisella's podcast a lot, some of Ed Milet's who, run the Arte Syndicate. And I thought podcasts were like something that only like celebrities or mega influencers, super successful people did. But then I got into Arte and I get access to all these other like-minded entrepreneurial people who I'm kind of like the baby in the group in terms of like where I was at with my business. And so just being around those people was obviously a huge game changer. But then I saw that a lot of them had podcasts and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like
you don't have to be like Andy Frisella
to have a million
podcast.
followers. Yeah. To have a podcast. And so that kind of got me like, I was like, that's interesting. Cause I'd had this concept, not most people in my head for several years, but I was like afraid to do anything with it. I wanted to create like YouTube or something like that, but I was terrified of putting out content because like my greatest fear growing up was public speaking. So, and like I couldn't listen to my own voice being played back to me. And so that literally like just the sound of my own voice played back to me for years kept me from making content that I wanted to make.
Yeah.
So it sounds like such a stupid little thing, but I guarantee we all have like stupid little things that are holding us back. But anyways, I got into the group. I got invited onto a podcast about marketing, which is what I was doing. But again, I wasn't passionate about it. I knew, and I had known for a while that where I wanted to be was in the personal development and coaching space. I just didn't know how yet. And so, but I also felt like if I gave up what I was doing with the online marketing, that I failed. And so I think I stuck with it a lot longer than I probably needed to because I was stubborn and I was like, well, I have to make this work. And if I quit, that means I'm a failure and everyone's going to think bad of me and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I was still doing that, got invited onto a marketing podcast. It was like 20 minutes long. It's a real short episode, but it felt like hours because it didn't go real well. I was super nervous. My voice was shaky. And I got off. I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be a podcaster anytime soon. And then I got invited onto another one. And so I was like, all right, I'll give this one more shot. This guy seems pretty cool. And that was more kind of like what we're talking about, the journey and mindset, stuff like that. And like an hour plus later, we're still rolling, having a great time. Felt like I hit a little bit of flow state, and that kind of stuff. And I shut the laptop and I was like, okay, not most people is going to be a podcast. And that was November of 2020. And then that was like the real turning point. 4 years into the journey, things finally were started to change because from there I said, okay, I'm going to have this thing launched by January. It took me until mid-March because as there's a lot that goes into podcasting or doing it well. And so, but it was just going to be a little side passion project. That was the plan. And it was something I felt like I needed to do. I was like, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing with the marketing. Maybe that'll eventually catch and start really working. But I found out very soon after I launched the podcast that I was getting lots of energy from that, lots of positive feedback. And I just wanted less and less to do with what I was hanging on to with the online marketing services. And so several months in, I had a lot of people asking me about podcasting and stuff like that. I think I was able to launch fairly well because I'm a researcher. I researched the heck out of it. I took courses and stuff like that before I launched, which helped obviously. But then also I was able to take those years of marketing that didn't really ever take off doing it for someone else, but I was able to apply it to what I was doing.
Right.
And so I was able to launch with a fairly well thought out, professional looking brand and knew who my audience was and that kind of stuff, which again, I had that idea. I sat on it for years. And so it really marinated and got super clear by the time I was doing anything with it. And so that was kind of the turning point. I decided to start helping other people with starting their own podcast. And I said, you know what, I'm stepping away from this. And I didn't know, like, there's a lot of uncertainty. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make money with this or how soon or anything like that. And like, how am I going to live kind of? And I got all this debt still that I'm working on. And, but I was like, I kind of just, I knew in my gut that that's like what I needed to do and that I would kind of figure it out along the way. And so I stepped away. It was like a huge weight off my chest of like being done with that and stepping into kind of this new thing that again seemed to, like, I think you'll know, like, when something gives you energy, do more of it versus something being a drain. And then from there, it was helping other people, continuing to grow the podcast, and then recently launching my own community. So that's kind of like, I know I just rambled for a bit, but that's kind of how I got here.
I mean, I had a comment recently where someone's like, Chris needs to do a better job interviewing other people. He always talks about himself. So I that's in my mind. And I know I'm trying not to like hog the conversation very much. And it was only one comment. So I think most people like hearing the back and forth banter. But why I want to bring this back to my situation is it sounds very similar. You know, my fiance is in accounting. She has like the steady job. Sounds like, you know, your wife, then girlfriend, was doing the travel nursing thing. So I assume, is she still in the nursing field, I assume?
She is. She's working on transitioning out, but yeah, right now she is.
Okay, cool. So like how is that dynamic? Because I think a lot of people in the audience likely have, you know, one person's trying to do the entrepreneur thing. They're not seeing success. What resonated so much is when you said you feel like you're working so hard and you're moving backwards. Man, that it almost seems like the easy thing is just to get a job and get a paycheck again and have some consistency when you're starting off, because a lot of people don't talk about how hard it is. But how was that dynamic? I mean, was she fairly supportive? Were you kind of like, hey, babe, are you grabbing dinner tonight? Because like, I don't want to put it on the credit card. Because I'm just really curious to hear how that went.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole episode just on that, I think. Okay, where do I start with that? Yeah, she like, it was interesting because when I met her, I had kind of grown up in this like typical middle class, didn't know any entrepreneurs growing up. She came from like, her dad had done really well for a little while. He made millions, spent millions, and grew up around a lot of like very successful people. And so she had like just a totally different mindset around that stuff than I did. And so when I met her and I was getting into real estate, I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, it just kind of expanded what I saw as like, oh, there really are a lot of like wealthy people around if you know where to look and that kind of thing. So it kind of changed my mindset there. But yeah, like, again, I was at the gym, I was starting real estate. Like, I wasn't making a lot of money. She was doing pretty consistent as a nurse. And so, yeah, over time, like, that's something that's really evolved. Because in the beginning, again, like I said, like, I would promise her the world. I'd be like, oh, don't worry. Like, in a few months, this is going to work and we'll be here. And a few months goes by and that doesn't happen. And then I'm like, oh no, that I was wrong about that, but this is it, you know? And so it's constantly kind of having to like, not sell her, but like convince her, like create that belief that a lot of times I didn't even have for myself.
Which is so hard to do because when you're not seeing the momentum and you feel like you're seeing backwards progress and you're getting excited about the next thing, but with each failure, part of you doubts more and more that it's possible. Like I felt like that. I know a lot of people in the audience have, but now I think that you most likely are starting to surround yourself, like you said, with the right people. I know you ran into Alex Hormozy at the gym recently. That's pretty cool. I saw your selfie, and just the belief, I'm sure, is starting to really come out even more because even for myself, I have this little, I know you have a Lamborghini on your desk too, right?
Yep.
We got these little, for those watching on YouTube, we both have the same model Lamborghini, I believe. What is that?
To do a race. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, same here. So we both have the Lamborghini on our desk as a reminder. And when I tell my fiance, I'm sure you do the same thing. Like she complained about the car being too low. I have a little Honda and I'm like, well, you got to get used to it, babe. How are you going to get in the Lambo one day? And I'm dead serious, kind of like a little joke where you're like, haha. But like for real though, in a few years, how are you going to do it? And I know you and I just both kind of emanate that belief. Do you feel more positively and strongly about everything that you're doing now than when you first started?
For sure. Yeah. So like I said, the turning point when I started to like when I started with Not Most People and the podcasting and stuff like that, and I started to finally feel like aligned, like, okay, I'm on the right path finally.
And energized from it too?
Yeah, like there was still a lot of uncertainty, a lot of like, oh man, like how fast can I make this happen? And the stuff from before haunts you because you're like, well, I thought before that something was going to work really big. So now I got to temper my expectations. I don't want to let her down again and that kind of thing. So it's this really interesting kind of like balance, but it's really
Yeah.
just having that vision and like that big picture, which I have now and I didn't have before.
Right.
Like now I kind of see like a year or two out, like what this thing could be. And I get excited about it. And I didn't have that for a long time, but also like the longer you do something, the better you're going to get at it. Like if you try,
Absolutely.
like you could be awful, but you're going to get better. Like same, like say you're obese or never been to the gym for a while, you're going to like not be an athlete, but you know, over time, like you work at it, like eventually you're going to get to a place that you never thought you could get to. And so it was several years in, and I find that to be kind of like a common benchmark. Like if someone can stick it out for 3 to 5 years, things will generally start to turn around. And that's a
That's
long
so
time
true.
for a lot of people.
And
Most
most people
people,
can't make that. It's such a
right?
long time. We live in
Yeah.
that microwave mentality society. If we don't see it in 3 to 5 months,
Hmm.
we're going to go stay at that job and just quit in most cases. A lot of people do, or at least
Yeah.
most people do.
Yeah. Yeah. Like someone says they tried something and they didn't do it. I'm like, well, how long did you try it for? And it's like, if it was less than 6 months, like you didn't really try, like you
Right.
didn't really give it a chance,
I mean,
you know?
imagine trying to get in shape, like you mentioned, and the obese
Hmm.
person, you're not going to look like The Rock in 6 months.
Yeah.
Maybe 6 years later or 2 years later of consistent work and diet and, all those different things that go into it. So that is like a superpower if you're able to even just keep showing up, because that's another thing. How do crazy people like us actually keep going? How did you stay motivated to keep trying when you kept making these promises that weren't panning out?
Mm.
Because every time you do that, it's like, man, that didn't work out either. Geez, I'm putting this on a credit card too. Like, how did you
Yep.
keep yourself motivated?
You know, it was kind of like I didn't have a choice. Like, I think if I had had a backup, I might have quit. You know, I wonder that sometimes. So, like, if I had a nursing degree, I probably would have gone and done nursing and not done what I did and stuck it out. But I was like, I didn't really have like, I was in the fitness space, but it's a very crowded space. There's no like, oh, you sign up and you're got a safe income with it. And so I kind of was like, I either got to figure this out. And at a certain point, I'd built myself enough debt that like if I went and got a regular job
It would have
without like
taken
a high
forever.
ceiling of income, like I'd never get out of it.
Yeah.
So I kind of like backed myself into a wall, burned the boats in that sense. And there's been so many times where I'd like, man, this is, I don't know if I could do this. Like I go on LinkedIn, I'd start looking at different jobs, Indeed. And every time I did that, I'd look through and I'd be like, man, I
I'm
don't
not
want to do
doing
any of this shit. Like,
it.
like none of these like look
I love it.
better than like what I'd be doing. Like none of them are gonna get me to where like I'm trying to go, you know,
That's
which like
so
I have a big
powerful.
vision and the the one thing that I will just like refuse is to settle for like average. Cause I'm like, if I'm going to live an average life, like I'd rather be dead. That's kind of like,
Absolutely.
that might sound extreme, but that's kind of always, that's been my mentality about it. Like, I want to travel the world. I want to hang out with amazing people. I want to, you know, impact a bunch of lives. And I'm not going to do that like with kind of your average job or settling or doing what's safe. So that was always just like, there's been so many times I've been looking over that cliff or like, this is it, like I'm done. But I always kind of found a way back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, it again, coming back to the relationship side of it, it was super hard because there were times where she's like, well, like I can't keep supporting and not having you contributing and that kind of stuff. She's like, why don't you look for a job? And then I'm like, well, that doesn't solve the problem necessarily. And so there was a lot of friction, a lot of fight. Like there was a period of years where it was just really kind of, you know, we always had a good relationship, but there was a lot of bumps and a lot of like headbutting because of that. And a lot of like, it took a long time, like probably 5 years. Like it'll be 7 years in May. It took 4 to 5 years before we started to really like understand and get on the same page and communicate the way we needed to communicate. And so again, same thing like with entrepreneurship, you're looking at that like 3 to 5 year like learning curve. And so now we're really on the same page. We're aligned, and we implemented, like right after our wedding, we implemented weekly business meetings, which we've been doing together every week, where we check in. Here's what we spent, here's what we made. Here are our goals for the week, for the month. What do we need help with? Like all this different stuff. And
cool.
So now that's really kind of accelerating the speed of things and how things are going. And so it's just, but yeah, there was definitely some rough areas in there. And the hard part is like, especially being a dude and like having your lady be like the breadwinner, like that hurts your ego.
Yeah.
Like you don't want that. And all you can say is like, listen, babe, one day it's going to be the opposite and you won't have to work, and that kind of thing. And again, you might not, like, it's really hard to believe that in the moment a lot of times when you're low, but that's just kind of like, what else can you say? And so that's just something that's like a huge motivator as well.
Absolutely. I mean, this sounds super similar because many years, we met when we both had great jobs. We both quit to pursue stuff we were passionate about. Literally, we both took like a 50% paycheck haircut. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I guess you don't really realize until you're in it. Like when you stopped training and you went on in our marketing, you probably started to realize like, dang, I want to travel. You had the travel bug, but now you probably felt guilty because you don't want to put more stuff on the credit card and you don't really have money coming in. And it feels like that for years, but I wrote that down because I'm sure so many people can resonate where you would look at LinkedIn jobs and you're like, I don't want to do any of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, it doesn't align with where I want to be with my core values, which my number one value is freedom.
Dude, that is so true. And like you mentioned, I know it sounds dramatic, but you'd rather die than live an average life. I totally agree. It's like the Matrix pill. What is it? The red pill? Is that the one where you take the red pill and you can see everything? Once you start tasting the freedom and getting to do what you want to do and structuring your day how you want, the thought of ever listening to someone tell you what to do again and like forcing you to go to meetings that you don't want to go to, it's ridiculous, right? And so you put yourself with your back against the wall to push yourself and force yourself to stay motivated, to keep showing up despite the challenging bumps in the road with the relationship and the finances, because I know that's obviously important. It costs money to live. I mean, it sounds like Arte, just joining that group, you said it was a big investment for you at the time. It sounds like that kind of helped you to start meeting other people that are at a different level where you realized you were the baby of the group and you started to see more and more what's possible, because there's some big players in there that are doing some massive things. And you may think that you're taking massive action. You realize someone just bought like 2 companies last weekend and you're like, damn, never mind. All right.
Yeah. Right.
I closed 2 new clients and I thought that was cool. I got to level up. Right. And you can actually talk to these kinds of people frequently, which is cool.
Yeah. And to go back to what you were saying before about kind of like rather die than the average life and that kind of thing, like that's me. That doesn't mean I'm hating on anyone who like wants to work a regular job.
Right.
I don't think like if you're average, you should go kill yourself or anything like that. Like,
no, disclaimer. Ridiculous. Yeah. Don't do that.
Yeah. But I think most of the people listening to this podcast probably are like, I feel the same way on some level. So,
I mean, anyone who has that entrepreneurial itch or wants to pursue it, people reach out all the time. I really want to quit my job. I want to start that side hustle. I don't know what to do. That's the journey. I mean, you mentioned it yourself with your journey. I think it's every entrepreneur's journey. You started in one thing, it wasn't really working. You jumped into marketing. You didn't know if you really liked that. Now you found where you are here, but you also mentioned something that was worth repeating. It's not like that marketing knowledge was wasted. It helped you apply that to your podcast and see like quicker success and growth than the person who was just haphazardly starting a new podcast without having done any research, without having any marketing knowledge. And so the thing that I want to point out here is that it just all stacks, right? Everything you learn, it's a never ending journey. You took the red pill and it's a never ending journey, right? You're never going to reach your potential. You're going to continue to chase it until you die. And hopefully you can get as close to that ideal vision as possible. But I think that's also the beauty, is that it never really ends. Like, you're going to stack skills. You're going to do more podcasts. You might jump up to speaking engagements and you'll be up there on stage teaching people at a conference eventually as well, right? Do you have those kinds of plans and visions for yourself?
I do. Yeah. The further you get, the more you see. It's like
Oh,
you know what I
that's
mean?
so good.
Like the further along you get, it's like the more it gets illuminated, the more
I
you
love
realize
that.
you didn't know before, and the more like new opportunities and possible. Like when I started podcasting, like even like 2 years ago, if you had told me like, yeah, 2 years from now, you're gonna have a podcast and you're gonna help other people podcast and you're gonna build this community, and I would have been like,
How?
what does that even mean? Like I don't, like I've been like, you're nuts. Like I don't speak in front of anyone. Like, but step by step that changes. And so like if you are just, and this is one of the biggest things I always talk about, is like always remain curious. Like I think so many people, they get into one thing and they're like, I learned this
I know
and like
it.
that's all I'm gonna know. And that's, I don't really like it, but that just means like that's what it is. And it's like, no, there's something out there that if you keep looking around, you're gonna find it and you're gonna love it.
Yeah.
Like everyone has those things, but not everyone takes the time and the energy to pursue and to keep reading and to keep meeting new people and trying new things. And like, it's just trial and error, man. Like everything. Like I started in the gym. I had no intention of ever like being a marketing person or like be an entrepreneur. That happened because I kind of stumbled across it and found it and was searching for what it gives me and stuff like that. And then from there, like podcasting was something that was never ever on my radar.
Yeah.
But I kept searching and I kept looking and I kept developing myself and learning about myself. That's the huge part, is learning what turns you on, what turns you off, what you like where you want to be, what your values are, like those kinds of things. That self-awareness gets clearer and clearer. And so now it's like 3 years ago, if you show me an idea or an opportunity, I'd be like, maybe I'd like that. Maybe I don't. I'm not really sure. Now it's like my compass is really clear. Like I know, okay, like that's aligned with me. That's not.
Yeah.
And it takes time to develop that, but I think most people just give up and they stop being curious.
Yeah. And I mean, at that point, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? If you're staying still, someone mentioned this the other day, if you're staying still, you're actually moving backwards because people that are growing are surpassing you. So I love that mindset. Remain curious always. That's another thing I just wrote down that you mentioned. As soon as you think that you know everything and that you no longer need to read or listen to new podcasts or go to conferences, that's when you often can get in trouble because I think it's important. There's a balance. You've got to focus and do the work. Sometimes we overwhelm ourselves with new information. Like, what you need to do and everything else can be a distraction. So I get that side, but I also see the other side of maybe you're focusing and you're going down the entirely wrong path because the industry is changing. And because you're not staying up to date, you don't know about these changes that are going to put you out of business 3 years from now if you're not focusing on them.
Yeah. And something else I was talking about recently is we talk about crises in terms of like quarter life crisis, midlife crisis. Those kinds of things typically come because someone wants, like, we all want to be moving forward, but a lot of times we'll just take off running instead of figuring out where we want to go to
in any direction, right?
Yeah. In any direction. We're like, oh, I can go do this. Like, okay, I'll do that. Oh, that's safe. Like maybe I'll do that. And then months or usually years or even decades later, all of a sudden one day we're like, oh shit, like this isn't really what I want. But I feel like I'm too far in, and how can I pivot and do something else?
Yeah.
And again, it's a lot of times people settle on that because they feel like, oh, this is it.
Yep.
So never, even if you think it's like you found your thing or whatever, like never stop exploring, because chances are like what you're into now and what you're into in the future and what you want, like it all changes and evolves. And so if you're like, it's sad to see people get like really far into something and then be like, man, like I'm having this, like midlife crisis was the thing, right? And now you're hearing about quarter life crises. Like everyone thinks they have to have it all figured out by like 25, or that they are like, man, I went to school and like you got this job, and then you're like, man, I'm 3 years in, this isn't really what I want.
Yeah.
How do I go from here? And a lot of times people will just stay because it's the safer option, or they haven't done the time to figure out where else they would want to go.
That's so powerful. And I think that's the biggest problem. That's the issue that I had, like we talked about when I was on your show, is most of us never take the time to figure out what we want. And it is because we are a product of our environment to an extent. You mentioned you didn't know any entrepreneurs, whereas your wife kind of had seen some, her dad had some success and spent millions, made millions type thing. So he knew it was possible. And so he's kind of playing in that level of it is possible. Whereas you were like, I've never met any millionaires in my life. Like, is it even possible? Can it be done? Can I do it? We're not always curious because we don't even know it's possible for ourselves. You assume that, well, I'm going to get my training degree and certifications. I'm just going to do that for a couple of years. Maybe I can become a general manager of this gym eventually. And we kind of set these smaller goals based on what we see around us. And that's when I had that, oh shit moment 3.5 years into my job. Like, why am I even here? And I'm not even interested. So tuning into yourself, self-awareness is another thing that you mentioned. That is a game changer because now you're at this point where I could present an opportunity. Dude, I got this great idea. You want to do this? And in 2 seconds, you have like your little chart in a way.
Like filters.
Nope, it does it either yes or no. It aligns or it doesn't align. It fits or it doesn't fit. And another great key for anyone listening that I remember hearing is like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. That's what I'm working to get towards. I'm sure you're there as well. And of course, we're going to have some stuff that we don't want to do that we have to. But that's the cool thing about entrepreneurship. You can't just tell your boss no if you have a job. When you are the boss and you do your own thing, you can kind of force yourself to do things that you don't want to do if you have to, or you can just delegate it or delete it entirely. So a lot more flexibility.
Yeah. I would say with the hell yes or hell no thing, get the details first and then decide, because
don't just do it right away.
Yeah. Don't just go like, because your gut is usually right, but not always right off the rip, especially if it's something that's new to you or different.
Yeah.
And I've seen people turn things down that they probably would have done if they had just like looked into it a little bit more. Yeah. Like I asked one of my sisters, I have 3 little sisters, and I asked one of them a few months ago, I was like, hey, you have any interest in working part-time, like doing some social media stuff for me or whatever? And she was like, oh no, I'm like real busy right now and all this. And I'm like, why would you not ask the details? What if I was willing to pay you $100 an hour? Like, you don't know. Right.
That's so true.
Yeah. So I was like, always like, it's nothing wrong with saying no, but like get some of the basic details first before you make that kind of decision. I think a lot of people can write things off or give that hell yes or hell no, like too early.
Yeah. And that's the hard part. Cause I know you mentioned too, you struggled with quitting on marketing because like you didn't want to be seen as a quitter. That is something that I think most people struggle with too. How there's no blueprint, right? How long do you try something before you quit? And is it okay to quit or pivot? Because you may be a failure if you try something for too long when really you should have quit it sooner to start the right thing. Right. So there's different sides to the coin, and it's very difficult because really only you can determine that. And maybe if you have a business coach, they may be able to give you some pointers or something, but like everyone's businesses and lives are so different that it really depends. I hate that answer, but it works, right? It depends on your situation, where you're at.
Well, yeah, my answer, and I say this all the time, is that the answer for most things usually lies in the middle. Like usually there's like this option, but usually somewhere in the middle. So like a lot of people don't try something long enough, like they quit early. Right. That's probably the majority of people. But then a lot of other people like myself hold on for too long because we're stubborn like that. And then the answer is somewhere in the middle of that. Yeah. So
good point.
Yeah. That's something you can apply to almost everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like what you mentioned there too, because I tend to lately, I either say yes or no pretty quickly. Like, nah, I don't think that's not for me. I'm not interested. Like I'm already shut off to it before I hear anything because I feel like it's a distraction. So I'm definitely going to be a little more open the next time someone brings an opportunity to me. I'll be like, okay, like let's schedule a time to chat about it or send me the details via email before I just say no, because you're right. I mean, if your sister had been like, how much? $100 an hour, like hell yeah, I'll do 5 hours.
I wasn't going to, but I was like, you never know.
Right. Yeah. See, that's why she probably was like, nah, he's gonna try to cheapskate me.
Yeah. And that's again another example of where the answer's sometimes in the middle, right? There's people who make snap judgments, snap decisions, let their emotions rule the day. And then there's people like I'm on the other end of the spectrum where I tend to overanalyze and maybe not make decisions fast enough.
Yeah.
And so again, it's that finding that kind of balance. And that's again tying back to the self-awareness. If you're like, okay, I'm someone who decides too fast, then maybe you slow yourself down,
Yep.
take a minute, look at it. If you're like, you know what, I need to work on my decision making, maybe you force yourself to decide a little bit faster.
Right, right. So the self-awareness, that kind of goes to you staying in the marketing for longer than you wanted to, me being 3.5 years into a job and being like, why am I even here? I had never asked the question. And I think everyone listening, it helps if you have like a life coach or a therapist of some sort, or read some kind of books on like psychology. There's one called Running on Empty that I read that my life coach recommended. And it was just about, childhood traumas. And it's not always about what your parents did, but also maybe what they did not do. Like there was no guidebook back then for how to raise your kids, right? A lot of times they did the best they could with the first kid, the second kid a little less, the third kid, like watch rated R movies when you're 10, right?
Exactly. Yep.
My two brothers.
Exactly how it goes.
I was the oldest child. And so I couldn't watch rated R movies till I was like 16 and a half, right? I think you have to be 17 to watch those technically. And so
theaters, yeah.
It's just funny how things change. But that was one book that really helped me tune into the self-awareness, because if you're not self-aware, and I'm just not saying to you, like to everyone listening, if you're not self-aware, then you don't know these things about yourself. But because you actually know, hey, I tend to take too long, you can maybe put a time limit on it. And on the other side, someone like myself who makes decisions too damn fast and puts money into places that I should have done more due diligence and now it's gone. Maybe that'll remind me as well to be like, hey, let me sleep on this instead of deciding immediately. Like, let me give myself a day instead of 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yep.
Which again, it comes back to that somewhere in the middle. So I love that, that idea. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And I think a tool that people can use to gain some self-awareness quickly is there's all kinds of different tests out there now, like personality type tests. And I don't put too much like, oh, whatever they say is the end all be all, or like, some people are big into astrology and they're like, I'm a Virgo, so I always do this, so
right. I don't want to put myself in a box either, but
you don't want to put yourself in a box, but they can kind of shed some light on some things. So like 16 personalities is a big one, right? The Myers-Briggs, Big Five, there's Strengths Finder. There's a whole bunch out there. And I found them like the more you do, the less you learn. But the first ones that you do that are like kind of in depth, you're like, okay, like this makes sense now, or this is why I have trouble following through with this, or why I enjoy this. And so again, it's a quick way to kind of gain some self-awareness just as a tool.
Yeah. And it's just a tool to get started with. I mean, I know I don't want to put myself in a box. Like if you read something about yourself and now you think that's how you are forever and it's in your subconscious.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Exactly. Take it with a grain of salt and understand that even if it does say you're like that, you literally can change if you just make a decision to become a different person. I mean, with you moving across the country and having a fresh start, you can change everything. No one has to know that you were like Bradley the partier in high school or anything like that, or even your friendships, right? Your circle, the people that you're hanging out with, you're hand selecting people that you want around you versus feeling like you just have to hang out with the people that you grew up with.
You probably weren't conscious about that growing up.
Exactly. You weren't aware, right? You didn't have the self-awareness, and now you do.
Yep.
So it all comes back full circle.
Yeah. As a kid growing up, like you don't get to pick. I mean, we obviously never get to pick our parents or our siblings,
your neighbors,
but like, you don't pick where you live when you're younger. You don't pick where you go to school. Usually like those things are just kind of given to you. And so then it's your chance to form and shape all that stuff for yourself.
Absolutely. And well, we talked about a lot of great stuff. I feel like the time has flown by. Is there anything that we missed or anything else you'd like to add, share from your story, a takeaway that you would recommend for the audience? Maybe someone who's struggling to make decisions or makes decisions too quickly. Like feel free to add whatever you feel would bring the most value to the audience.
Yeah. So I know you were getting into a question and I never really answered it because I went back to a couple of things, but about getting into the Arte Syndicate and getting around those kinds of people. Like, I think that is one of the biggest hacks out there for success. Like think about like, is it easier to get in shape working out on your own in your house? Or is it easier to go to a group class where like you're there, like you're going to do the work, or you're around other fit people?
Yep.
Versus hanging out with like a bunch of people who they like to like they're overweight. They like to go and just eat and drink and whatever. Like you're likely to conform to the group or your surroundings. And so getting around like the kinds of people that are really doing big things are like-minded versus the people who are still stuck in their like high school or college glory days. And like, that's where they peaked, and they do this, they go to the same bars every Friday night and stuff like that. Like, where do you think you're going to have more success? So like, that was, like I said, a lot of money for me. I didn't necessarily like make immediate sales and ROI on it, but hands down, long term, the ROI is astronomical because it completely changed my viewpoint, completely changed my circle, who I surrounded myself with, who I had access to. Like, you get a group like that, like you're part of the club. So when you reach out to someone to connect, they're like, yeah, man, of course, let's do it. Let's hop on a Zoom.
That's been so cool to see, man. Just the amount of friend requests. They don't even know me, but they see that I'm in Arte too. Friends. Easy.
Yeah, man. It's like a brotherhood. And then just like, and then once you're around that, like, you don't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know? And so, but like, if I were to try and like, I think there's usually around 2,000 people in Arte, give or take. If I were to try and like corral random people and like find 2,000 like-minded people, it would take me like decades to do it on my own.
They kind of self-select though, because people find the content from Andy and Ed, they apply, they join. The ones that don't fit or can't really, collaborate with others, they kind of fall off. And then the ones who really form relationships and start businesses together, like, that's such a powerful thing you just said there too, because for you to go find 2,000 people, I mean, geez, good luck, right? It's going to take forever. You got to interview them pretty much. Whereas here,
especially that level of people, whereas I'm still a newbie, like I would never be in those circles that way, that fast. Yeah.
It is truly the fastest hack to get in the room is just to pay to be in that right room.
Yeah. And then one other thing when it comes to like networking, because I know people like entrepreneurs or networkers most of the time.
Yeah.
Is I find a lot of them have very limited, and I used to think this way too, like a limited viewpoint of it. Like, oh, well, this person is in my industry or this person's local to me, so I'm going to talk to them. But like, oh, if this person like doesn't share that, I'm not interested. But I find like, if you know that someone's like-minded, like anyone in Arte, I'll hop on a call with, because I know we think similar and good things always come out of it, whether it is a direct business referral or client, or just something totally different that you connect on and build a relationship on. And so that's my advice is be open-minded, just meet good people and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah. Such good advice. Again, I love how you're more on the train of like being open-minded. Don't close off opportunities so quickly, because you really have to hear the details, and you never know, right? Never judge a book by its cover. We kind of make assumptions based on, oh, they're in that kind of business, or I don't think they can help me.
Right.
But like literally the amount of stuff you've learned in the last 5 years, imagine that multiplied times 2,000 people that are also on a crazy journey to like level up at an insanely fast pace. We all have stuff we can learn from each other. And so that's just a great reminder for everyone listening to not discredit or downplay the value of a potential relationship just because you don't necessarily have similarities in industry or background or whatever. So 100%. Good stuff, Bradley, man. This has been awesome conversation. I'm sure we would be able to talk for another 2 hours easily.
Definitely.
And we'll have to hang out if you're ever in town or whenever I make it out to Arizona. But before I let you go, where can our audience go to find you, to check out your community, listen to your podcast and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. So for the podcast, it's Not Most People. It should come up as the first result on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Chris, his episode just came out, depending on when you're listening to this. So definitely tune in, because it's cool, swapping and being on both sides of it. So
for sure.
That's the podcast. NotMostPeople.net is kind of the online home of all that. And then I guess personally, I'd love to connect with anyone through Instagram. It's just @Bradley_Roth. Super easy. Send me a DM, whatever, hit me up. Would love to connect. And then the Alliance is the most recent big development or project. So like I was talking about, we've been talking about the power of communities. I recently launched my own. It's called the Not Most People Alliance. And it is basically a community of people who are allergic to mediocrity, groupthink, and following the status quo. So if you want to get around great people for a small fraction of the price of something like an Arte, then, feel free to check it out. That's, again, notmostpeople.net/alliance is all the info for that.
Awesome. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes. And Everyone who's listening, go over the show notes either on YouTube or on the podcast and click on the link. I'm sure most people probably heard .net, but we'll probably type in .com if they're on their computer. So like .net, N-E-T,
Yeah,
everyone.
I'm still trying to hunt down the guy who owns that domain. I can't get a hold of him.
I'm sure you'll grab it eventually, but I mean,
Yeah.
for now, you can do that, and then eventually you can drive it and redirect it to the .com. I don't know. I remember hearing some marketers talking about it, like, oh, everyone uses .com, just get .com. But domains, like you figured out with that one, especially great names, are so freaking hard to chase down. And even if it's a dead site, just people sit on them for years because they can, you know?
So fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But I'll occasionally look out for it, and I'll let you know, like, hey, dude, it's available. Go buy it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Well, cool. Thanks again, Bradley. This has been an awesome conversation. I'll drop everything in the show notes, and I look forward to staying in touch and watching you grow.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me on. This was a blast.
Absolutely, man.